X Winterview. Where are we? Mid-September 2015. This is for Annastacey. What is enlightenment? Very difficult question to answer, but I'm going to give it a crack. No, not going to give it a crack. Change my mind. It's probably better to explain this from another perspective. Life seems to be a story. That is, it seems to make sense in some ways. It just seems to unravel, unfold, and in a very neat personal narrative. And when I say neat, I don't mean nice, I just mean that the narrative seems to make sense in some ways. This narrative usually refers to a central character. This character is me, or I, in simple terms. The me or I is generally who you take yourself to be. In other words, life is happening to me, as far as I'm concerned. So no matter what unfolds in my life, it always refers back to me. So I wake up, I have breakfast, I get ready, I go to work, I work, I sometimes don't work very hard, I go to the bathroom, I have an argument, I have a laugh, I stop work, I get in my car, I come home, I eat dinner, I watch TV, I go to bed, rinse, repeat, etc. So the whole apparent unfolding of life happens to me, it seems. Enlightenment, funny word, use it cautiously, just in case it doesn't mean anything. Enlightenment is the recognition, or if you prefer, the realization that this life that seems to be unfolding for me is unfolding, but not for me, not for anyone. The me that I thought I was, this person I thought I was, unfolds seemingly with the unfolding of life. As you can see, I'm trying to bend description just to explain this. Traditionally, enlightenment has been conceptualized as some kind of awakening of consciousness, or a rise in consciousness, and has been portrayed or painted as a very mystical, special state that happens to a person who has good fortune, or has prayed a lot, has meditated, has done some kind of spiritual act or service or practice. It seems that some endeavour brings them to this magical, mystical state called enlightenment, where they realize some secret of the universe, some truth that no one else gets, and wisdom seems to be part of that reward in some ways. The story of enlightenment is very beguiling, very compelling, hooks people in to this idea. Now, when I say hooks people in, it doesn't really hook anyone in. This is just a story about enlightenment that you're hearing right now. And that's how it seems to go. For a lot of people, it seems to be the case that there's some sort of sense that if I do something, if I meditate, if I pray, etc., that I'll get some reward, and that's what enlightenment is. Paradoxically, enlightenment seems to be the recognition of the immediacy, the raw immediacy of life, such that it's so immediate, in fact, that you couldn't even you couldn't even say it's happening right now. It's too immediate for that. And of course, with that immediacy, it erases all future and past. It's just too immediate. And so it can't really be captured in description, or you might say the unfolding of a description about life is what's happening. It's so maddening to try and conceptualize life as it unfolds in that raw immediacy that people often end up tongue-tied or speaking in rhymes and riddles and paradoxical strangeness that doesn't actually make much sense, so that the listener gets confused. Of course, if you've been following what I've been saying, you might also recognize that there is no listener to get confused, nor any real confusion, because that too is the unfolding of life in the raw immediacy. In essence, there's no escape from that automatic unfolding of that raw immediacy of life. That was my brief attempt, we'd say, to explain enlightenment. That will probably contradict more traditional views, and while I'm on the subject, maybe we should just take a look at some of those traditional views of enlightenment and see where perhaps the confusion arises. So what I'm doing is getting on the old interwebs, typing in enlightenment, and where better place to start than Wikipedia. Enlightenment. So, lots of definitions, some from philosophy, some from Buddhism. Let's go with the good old spiritual kind, because that seems to be the most popular. Right. Wikipedia. Quote, Enlightenment... can't even start. Enlightenment refers to the full comprehension of a situation. I go with that. It is commonly used to denote the age of enlightenment, but is also used in Western cultures in a religious context. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. There's a lot of blah there, a lot of blurb. Try and get down to the core. Let's go to Buddhism. The term enlightenment has commonly been used, blah, blah, blah. A lot of writing here. It literally means awakening and understanding. Someone who is awakened has gained insights into the workings of the mind, which keeps us imprisoned in craving, suffering, and rebirth. And has also gained insight into the way that leads to nirvana, the liberation of oneself from this imprisonment. So there's a good starting point for a very common misunderstanding about enlightenment, and commonly promoted by Buddhism, a classic vehicle for the misunderstanding of enlightenment. I do realize, by the way, that I've probably just upset vast populations of the world, and if I'm not careful, there might be some Buddhist jihad on the way. So, not one to shy away from controversy, I'm going to plough on. This is a common misconception about enlightenment, that this will happen to a person, and it will reveal a secret, and you are currently imprisoned such that you don't understand this right now until you release yourself. This is a wonderful story of personal endeavor. Of course, it's going to happen to me, for starters, and it also suggests that this me character is somehow limited or imprisoned. And if I do such and such an activity, I will be released. And it's so compelling, this story, that it literally hooks in millions and millions trying to follow this. Now, I'm also aware as I say this, that what I'm saying is just a story about Buddhism and about enlightenment unfolding in the raw immediacy of this moment. Now, this is where it gets paradoxical. In one sense, there's nothing wrong with the Buddhist definition. It just is what it is. In the other sense, though, it points to a nonsense. It points to the nonsense of the existence of an individual person who can or cannot do something. And not only that, that if they do something well, if they do the right thing, there will be a reward. So compelling is that story that you could almost take it out of enlightenment and apply it to any field of endeavor, that if you do the right thing, there'll be a reward. And that will really hook in a lot of people. Okay, let's move on from Buddhism. Let's go to something called Advaita Vedanta. It's a philosophical concept where followers seek liberation by recognizing identity of the self and the whole, brackets Brahman, through long preparation and training, usually under the guidance of a guru, that involves efforts such as knowledge of scripture, renunciation of worldly activities, and inducement of direct identity experiences. And it goes on. Okay, so let's look at the core here, that once again the follower or the seeker is looking for something called liberation or release by recognizing something that is called the self with a capital S. So this idea that this can be achieved through process, and recognition of the self brings back to a reward. Once again, a very compelling story. So you might notice again the twofold paradox. On the one hand, what I'm talking about is unfolding in the raw immediacy of this instant. And on the other hand, it's a story about enlightenment through the Advaita Vedanta mode that's also unfolding in the moment. And as a story, so what? It's just a story. And for the seeker who's experiencing the story, it might seem like the story of Advaita Vedanta or the story of Buddhism is pointing to something in reality, something that can be achieved because the story is true. This is a real sticky subject too with enlightenment, that these stories are pointing to something real or true or have some reference point on which they're based. But actually, all they are is stories unfolding in the raw immediacy of this instant. So I could go on. There's Shankara referenced here in Wikipedia. Neo-Vedanta, something called Neo-Vedanta. What is that? It's in the, let's see, someone called I'm going to get the name wrong, Vivekananda revived Hinduism, spread Advaita to the West via Ramakrishna mission, blah-de-blah-de-blah, and his interpretation has been called Neo-Vedanta. Okay, and he said, apparently, in 1896 in London, I may make, you know, he actually didn't just say that. It was me wrecking what he just said. I'll try it again. I may make I'm going to break into an Indian accent, I can tell. I can just tell. I may make bold... Oh, that's terrible, isn't it? Okay, sorry, India, I just offended you all, I know. I may make bold to say that the only religion which agrees with, and even goes a little further than modern researchers, both on physical and moral lines, is Advaita. And that is why it appeals to modern scientists, etc., etc. So once again, I actually have no idea what he's talking about, to be honest, but it sounds good though, doesn't it? And then there's some talk about doing meditation to withdraw from the world and contemplate something called consciousness, if that's at all possible. And then what else have we got down below? Neo-Advaita, not to be confused with Neo-Vedanta. Neo-Advaita is something, a Western interpretation of the teachings of Ramana Maharshi, and is criticized for discarding the traditional prerequisites of the knowledge of the scriptures. How dare they? Modern teachers are, notable modern teachers are H.W.L. Punja and his students, and someone called Eckhart Tolle. So, once again, if we are to believe Wikipedia, these teachers have rejected the necessary preparation of the scriptures. How dare they? Then there's yoga, jhana yoga, bhakti yoga, karma yoga, then Jainism, etc. On it goes. So all these wonderful, varied stories on something called enlightenment. And again, seemingly, when I look at them, they're all pretty much saying more or less the same thing, that you have to do something to get this enlightenment thing. Whether it's worship, read scriptures, meditate, do yoga, etc., etc. Listen to your guru, like a good follower, I suppose. Once again, you can see how this plays out on two levels. On the one hand, there's the story of, let's say, the story of Bhakti Yoga, and it has a lovely sort of Eastern sounding thing where you practice, where you worship God and devote yourself in some way to something called God. And of course, if you worship, I'm guessing in a sincere way of some kind, you will be rewarded with enlightenment once again. So same kind of thing. But the key here is that this will all happen to you. And this is the central confusion, I think, from all these schools, we'd say, of enlightenment. However, on the other hand, it's not a confusion at all, because each expression, each story just unfolds spontaneously. There's no right or wrong story. There's no better or worse appearance in the world. It might be tempting to judge the world. This is wrong. These stories are incorrect. Ramana Maharshi was limited, or Neo-Vedanta is silly and doesn't quite hit the right traditional, hotspots, etc. And there's a better way to explain it, and on and on. That's all the story of enlightenment. But what enlightenment is, coming back to the basics, the real basics, it's the recognition that this life unfolds in that raw immediacy for no one. No one at all. There's no person experiencing life. There's just life. And in fact, if you want to go a little bit more sort of esoteric, there's not even that, because of course that's the post hoc story, if you like, about life. Me trying to describe life. It's indescribable. It's actually indescribable. There's nothing that can be said about it. It's that immediate. It's very alive, life, funnily enough. Very alive. So Annastacey, this is the This is the difficulty for people wanting enlightenment. This is the paradox, you might say. It seems that the stories are all personal. Enlightenment happens to you. But the recognition is, there isn't a you. There isn't anything, in fact. There's nothing happening, and there's no one there to know that. That's cray-cray, hey? X Winterview, signing out of this brief dialogue in What is Enlightenment? Special apologies to India and Buddhism and Neo-Vedanta, Neo-Advaita, etc. for my I don't know, mildly insulting comments, I suppose. Comments, welcomes. Please keep them, I don't know, clean and nice, etc. Thank you.